Okay, I think the streaming has now started, so we'll commence the meeting. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we're meeting today, given that this is an electronic meeting, and of course to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I've got a range of community service announcements to make at the beginning, so please bear with me. The meeting is being recorded and webcast, and you're encouraged to bear that in mind in choosing what you say. There is to be no other recording or filming of this meeting in the absence of the prior permission of the panel. The panel's decisions from the meeting and audio recording should be available on Council's website ordinarily well within 7 days from this meeting. Please turn off your electronic devices or put them on silent so that you're free from interruption. Okay, the panel members for this meeting are myself, Donna Reigate, as chair, Greg Flynn, an expert or professional panel member, Sue Francis, another expert or professional panel member, and Lynette Hunt, who is the nominated community panel member. So welcome, everybody. We have no apologies at this point. The meeting today is going to consider the following development applications. Development application 430/2019, proposed development at 28 Brava Avenue, San Remo, which is alterations and additions to an existing neighbourhood centre, the San Remo Neighbourhood Centre. The second DA is DA 592/2019, proposed development at 1 Canangra Drive, Crangan Bay, use of existing clubhouse building that belongs to the Junior Trail Mini Cycle Club. And the third development application is DA 57302/2019 at 269 Brisbane Water Drive, West Gosford. That is the proposed redevelopment of the existing West Gosford shopping centre, including addition of a childcare centre and food and drink premises. The panel has been provided with assessment reports prepared by council staff, as well as public submissions on the applications. Site visits have been undertaken. Council staff have also briefed the panel on and provided additional information on the key issues the applications raise. We've got the following people registered to address the panel today, all in relation to the proposed redevelopment of the existing West Gosford Shopping Centre. That's Mr. Colin Douglas, who's speaking against the proposal, and representatives of the applicant, James Virgos, Jonathan Wood and Michael Cortis Jones. I also understand that a request to speak form was received for another representative of the applicant, Mr. Anthony El Hazuri, but that was received after the cut-off time for requests to speak. So I think perhaps Mr. El Hazuri will be able to advise his colleagues who are registered to speak if needs be. Okay, so welcome everybody. What we will do, I think, is probably, even though the West Gosford matter is the third development application on our agenda, we might move that one forward so that speakers aren't hanging around. And in that case, we will hear from Mr. Douglas against the redevelopment of the shopping centre, and then from the applicant's representatives. A usual practice is to allow members of the public 3 minutes to speak on the matter, and each member of the public who registers would get that 3 minutes, with time possibly extended with the panel's agreement. Once the members of the public have spoken, representatives of the applicant will be given a maximum collective speaking time of 15 minutes to respond to those issues that are raised, should they wish to. As the panel's been provided with copies of all the submissions received in response to the development applications, there's no need to repeat the points made in those submissions verbatim. I also ask that each speaker be heard in silence while they're addressing the panel, and that courtesy and respect be observed throughout the meeting, please. There shouldn't be any personal criticism directed at any speaker or at council staff. That would be contrary to the panel's code of conduct and won't be accepted. It also adds nothing to the process of actually considering the matters at hand. Panel members may ask questions of the speakers to clarify our understanding of what's being said. And after hearing from the speakers, panel members might also ask questions of council officers to clarify matters raised. So after we hear from the speakers on each agenda item, we will adjourn the meeting to confer. If we were meeting in person, we would probably then reconvene the meeting to hand down the panel's decisions. But given that we're doing this electronically, we'll instead seek to have the panel's decisions up on council's website as soon as possible. At the conclusion of the adjournment, we might decide to make a decision on the matter, or if more information is required by the panel, the decision could be deferred either for a further public meeting or to be dealt with electronically. That's the end of the community service announcements. I now move on to the first agenda item, which is about declarations of interest. Panel members are reminded of the requirements in the Code of Conduct about conflict of interest declarations. We've received declarations from each of the panel members today where no conflicts of interest have been reported. Does any member of the panel have a declaration of interest which hasn't previously been made? I'm taking silence as a big no. Okay. On that basis, we've got a recommendation that panel members confirm they've signed a declaration and we'll take any management measures identified, none of which have. So we'll just minute that we've dealt with that, please, Rachel. Confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes of the panel's meeting on the 9th of July have been circulated. I note that nobody else who's on the panel today was actually part of that meeting other than myself. I think they're a pretty accurate reflection of the discussion. Does anybody else have any comments on the minutes? Any of the other panel members? Nope. Okay, well, given that I was the only one there, I'll move that that those minutes be confirmed. Could somebody else second that?
Seconded.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, moving on to the development applications. As I noted earlier, given that we only have speakers for one agenda item, I'd like to bring that item forward for consideration, and I move the following motion: that the local planning panel resolve that the following item be considered first, with the remaining items to be in agenda order, I should say. That agenda item is 3.3. Does someone want to second that?
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Okay, I put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion is carried. We will now move on to agenda item 3.3, which is the proposed redevelopment of the West Gosford Shopping Centre. And I would like to invite Mr. Colin Douglas to address the panel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I speak for the residents of 267 Brisbane Water Drive, West Gosford, next door to the proposed development, and also for much of the community in the area of the shopping centre, which happily supports the centre's redevelopment, but is entirely opposed to having a fast food outlet in the car park, as shown by the many objections lodged on the council website. The residents of 267 Brisbane Water Drive are classed as sensitive receivers R1 or SR1 in the noise and impact statement, the NIS, prepared by Reverb Acoustics. Both the NIS and the Statement of Environmental Effects, the SEE, failed to adequately address the effects of the proposed outlet on us for the following reasons. The NIS states that the outlet will operate 24/7. We submit that such operation should not be considered until any possible negative environmental impacts, including any antisocial behaviour in the area, have been more fully assessed. The NIS does not take into sufficient account the LA1, the 1 minute measurement for noise amenity, which is the loudest 1 minute in a 15-minute sampling period and is what results in sleep disturbance. 24-hour operations have a high potential for increasing LA1 readings due to noise from both patrons and vehicles. The NIS submits that noise from the restaurant may be, quote, audible at times, but not intrusive of nearby residences. As receivers SR1, we will be impacted, as the restaurant noise will be constant, very nearby, and different from everyday background noise. The 2.8 meter acoustic wall will be very intrusive, block sunlight from our gardens, and will also restrict daylight entering our ground floor rooms. The SEE fails to take into account lighting pollution. Large, bright advertising signage at a height of 8 meters will be shining directly into our bedroom windows. The SEE fails to address the problem of odors from the restaurant. The vents releasing kitchen odors will be discharging them outside our windows. Waste management is poorly addressed in the SEE. Possibly mismanaged waste will increase the likelihood of bad odors and vermin, which will then have access to our properties through the drainage holes in the acoustic wall. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Douglas. Appreciate those comments. Okay, Mr. Vergos and colleagues, do you have things that you would like to say in response to the remarks of Mr. Douglas, or other things you want to tell the panel?
Jonathan Wood here. I'm the town planner who's worked on this particular project, so I might lead off with discussions. Mr. Vergos may have some comments, but I'll probably do most of the talking on this particular matter. So yeah, I fully appreciate the concerns raised by the objector. I understand, of course, that there would be concerns around the Hungry Jack's proposal and its location. I mean, firstly, in relation to the acoustic impacts, the acoustic report has found that the impact will be acceptable subject to recommendations of that report, and that puts some limitations on particularly the acoustic barriers that requires a 2.7 barrier. Oop, I've just lost. Can everyone still hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
So there's a 2.7 metre acoustic barrier, and the council has obviously considered as well the issue around any potential, I suppose, twice visual bulk as well as overshadowing, and they've suggested that should be set in, that we should slide the entirety of the Hungry Jack's component, the drive-throughs, by a metre that will let us set back the acoustic barrier, potentially get some more landscaping in there, as well as having a height of 2 metres to the barrier itself, and then a 700mm return, an angled return that runs back into our site, so that we're sort of limiting the visual impact of that barrier as well as the visual impact, and the acoustic impact is still mitigated. So we believe that acoustically it's meeting the required standards of that are set out in the acoustic report. So we believe that impact will be acceptable. We know that the council has put fairly stringent conditions around acoustic testing during operation at various stages of when that particular building is commissioned. And there's a very detailed plan of management by Hungry Jack's, who operate not far from the site, and they're actually intending on relocating to this particular site. So there's a fairly detailed list of measures that are proposed by the operator, because this is obviously a key concern of any 24/7 fast food style operation. So we believe that the acoustic impact's been addressed. There's also some conditions in the assessment report that deal in part to some of the lighting concerns, and ensuring that we obviously don't cast light to the adjoining property, and that's likely to be required to have some sort of hood elements over any floodlighting, so there's no sort of light spill. And the council's added some conditions to that effect. So we believe we have considered those aspects. I might talk more generally about the scheme itself. Obviously, you've been to the site and seen that it is in need of some rejuvenation. Obviously, we're moving the existing tavern to facilitate a much better sort of entry sequence, I guess, from the existing car park. We are adding in, obviously, a childcare centre at the first floor that will involve taking off some of the roof as well. But we think ultimately this refurbishment will be a much better outcome on the site than what's there today, in terms of the way it interacts, the way it presents to the car park and other street frontages, and just operationally it will work a lot better than it does now. And and our client is obviously very keen to get on and have this occur. There's a couple of specific matters that we wanted to raise with the panel. We've obviously reviewed the report and conditions, and there are quite a number of conditions that are proposed by the council. In the main, we're fairly comfortable with those, including the staging. In reality, the staging is likely to roll out across one sort of proposal. However, the fact that we've got two different buildings, we've got the Hungry Jack's building, we've got the refurb, and then we've got the childcare centre, means that the staging we had proposed was more just the construction staging that might occur. We actually anticipate that it will all occur in roughly the same sequence, but we're happy with the way council's dealt with the staging in the report and the conditions. Particularly, we acknowledge the concern around the fact that the staging that was proposed would result in a bit of a parking deficiency for a time. So the way that it's been conditioned with regard to staging, we're comfortable with that. We're comfortable with most of the other conditions that are requiring some amendments. The only exception to that is that there is a condition, I think it's condition 2.3B, that talks about some fairly specific requirements for additional landscaping on the site. Obviously, being the site, you would have seen that there's very limited, if any, real landscaping on the site at present. There's a couple of hedges in a couple of areas. The landscape scheme that we have increases the landscaped area in the order of 500 square metres approximately. That particular condition requires a further 150 square metres through the southern part of the site, which is part of the car park area. Our concern with that, I suppose, is twofold. One is obviously loss of parking spaces, which is obviously of concern, but beyond that, it's probably also the fact that the site at present has very little landscaping. What we're seeking to do is refurbish the facility. We're increasing landscaping where we can. We actually think there is opportunity to improve the landscaping on the site, but not in the way that the council might be suggesting. In particular, the return and earn that you might have seen on part of the site that we propose to relocate to the southwest corner of the site that you'll see on the plans. Council's basically said that they're not supportive of that, which we understand, and we're not objecting to that. We would actually suggest that could be removed entirely and replaced with a reasonable deep soil pocket to get some more landscaping there. And we're also going to explore some additional landscaping through the central forecourt in proximity to the play area. There's sort of 5 sort of very small, roughly 5 square metre sort of planting pockets, and we were actually thinking we'd consolidate those into 3 much larger planting areas to enable some canopy trees through that area to the forecourt, which we think will be beneficial to the facility itself. In relation to shade, I suppose trees serve a series of functions. Obviously, landscape setting, which we really say is not that relevant in a B2 context. We do acknowledge there's existing vegetation on Henry Kendall Street. It's largely in the road reserve. But obviously, the second function of trees is shade. We've got some shade sails over the sort of central parking bays that we have that we've proposed just from an operational point of view, and it seems to be a preference for people to obviously be able to use shade and also still park in those areas during when it rains and the like, so you can still move your groceries and the like into your car without getting completely soaked. So we do have those shade structures proposed. In our view, we think that condition 2.3B as it stands is a little bit excessive and onerous, and we'd suggest that be altered to do the things that I'd set out around the replacement of the return and earn with a deep soil pocket, and then an expansion of the potential deep soil pockets in the forecourt spaces. Beyond that, we're generally happy with the conditions that are proposed. We're obviously here to answer any questions that the panel may have, but we're very keen to push on and have this development rolled out, and we think it'll be a positive thing for the area in terms of giving it a much needed facelift and revamp from what's there at present.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Does nobody else wants to speak on behalf of the applicant? You've still got a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I might just ask if James, do you wish to add anything, or Michael? Take that as a no.
Okay, righto. Thank you very much. I'll now open it up to the panel members for questions And we might, we'll start with Greg. We're at the top of the screen.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Madam Chairman. Jonathan, thanks for explaining all your response there. I just noticed condition 2.3 and reading the report generally that condition 2.3 requires, firstly, there's the staging plans that are required to be amended, but 2.3, there's a whole lot of other things that need to be looked at, like, as you said, the relocating of the boundary a metre to the north, the acoustic fence and so forth. Recycling be deleted. Plan to identify all the mixed recyclables and storage and service locations. That's, I understand, is required as well. There's the landscaping issue and the soil, deep soil planning, etc. There's quite a few things there that needed to be looked at. Did council actually advise you of this and ask to meet or get amended plans or to address these issues prior to finally resolving to determine the application?
If James is on the line, I might get him to comment, but to my knowledge, no. There was a little bit of discussion in the lead up to the finalisation of the report, and there was some suggestion that maybe some conditions imposed, but there was certainly no sort of detailed request for information provided that said, hey, look, we want you to look at X, Y, and Z and address that through further plan amendments. So it's something that's, I suppose, come up very late in the piece. And I mean, ultimately, it would have been better, I suppose, for us to have been able to actually physically amend the plans. Having said that, as I say, we're okay with the first, with, I suppose, 2.3A and what it requires us to do, and we think it's achievable. It's just 2.3B that is a little bit problematic because of the knock-on impacts to car parking effectively, because obviously we have roughly the same number of cars that we currently have. Removing the tavern means that the sort of net traffic and parking impact is actually marginally reduced, but we're still technically a bit short how much parking we would need if this was to be a development starting from a clean slate, I suppose. So as I say, we think 2.3A, we're confident that that all can work.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine. But you're saying the council didn't advise you of those?
No, sorry guys, I just got online. No, they didn't.
Okay, could I ask the council officers?
Yeah, I suppose you may as well do it now rather than say it.
I can leave it.
No, go for your life, Greg.
So is Chris Ross the assessment officer there?
Yeah, I am, Greg. I am.
Okay, Chris, did council in any way go back to the applicant here with respect to landscaping issues, or particularly the waste management issues associated with it, or any other item? There seems to be a lot of sort of specific things you're after. Were any of those brought to the attention of the applicant in the last 6 months?
Yeah, they were. Landscaping was brought up as far back as October last year, and then we've discussed that on and off over the phone since. The condition that was included in the consent was discussed with the applicant through email back in March, and then again at the start of this month to confirm that we were including something like that if the plans were received. Waste management.
The specifics of the landscaping weren't included in the email.
Sorry, the requirement that the landscaping was...
Let's not argue. I'm asking questions. So basically, you did advise the applicant of those requirements?
Correct.
Thank you. I've no further.
You've got no other questions, Greg?
Not at this stage.
Okay, we'll move on to you, Sue.
Okay, thank you very much. Just clarifying the staging. I know you've mentioned it, Jonathan, in relation to condition 1.2. It's not usual, as I think you said, to stage the DA. It's just a matter for you in construction how you stage it through your CCs. Is that really okay to have it staged in the manner that it is?
Yeah, happy to respond. So short answer is yes. I mean, the way that it's been set up by the council, we're comfortable with that. I mean, as I said at the outset, the intent is really to roll it out in a single stage. It's more the fact that we can get separate CCs, potentially separate OCs for various elements. Obviously, the childcare centre is fundamentally detached from obviously the Hungry Jack's component, for example. So we don't necessarily want one thing holding up another in terms of the program. So the staging that's proposed, we're comfortable with that. It will work from a project management, development management point of view. So we don't have any concerns with that. And as I say, in reality, we're likely to have probably a couple of CCs issued at roughly the same time, because obviously the fact that it is an operational centre at the moment means we don't want much downtime, and we don't want it to be a construction site for an extended period of time, just because of the impacts that will have on trade. So the staging's there, we're comfortable with it. The reality of the rollout is that it will almost look as though it's all happening at once, because it in fact will be. It's just in terms of when we complete various elements, when we finish and able to get OC, that will differ slightly.
Yeah, and you're okay. You're satisfied that you can get your OCs in the order that they are, because that's what you're signing up to.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Otherwise, you're going to have to put modifications into the application to modify that.
That's true. So that's a potential fallback, but we've worked through it obviously in the time that we've had to make sure that it can work, because otherwise we'd be saying, well, hang on, that doesn't quite work. We'd like to adjust this, that, or the other, but we're comfortable with it.
Okay. Right. No more questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sue. Lynn. Can't hear you. I think you might be on mute.
Yes, nothing specific from me. My original concern was the impact on residents and the vegetation buffer and the acoustic wall that was going to be set up. And I'm satisfied that the conditions established by council effectively address those things. So nothing further from me on that.
Okay, thank you. I'm interested in why the signage has to be 2 metres higher than is ordinarily allowed in that area.
Sure. So I'm happy to respond to that. Obviously, I thought that question might arise, given it is beyond the height in the DCP, obviously well below the height in the LEP, but they're sort of slightly two different controls. Ultimately, what it comes down to is the fact that we want the signage to be seen, and so people are aware of it. So the size of it, we'd sort of taken into account where it's located, sort of the fact that we've consolidated a large portion of the signage in that one sort of zone. So it's just really to have more real estate in summary. So there's the logic is more around the commercial realities on the site. So the 8 metres was chosen as sort of accommodating the needs of the Coles and the various other operators that we have as well.
Right. Do you have any further comments to make on the practicality of poking the return and earn facility up into the corner of the car park as proposed?
So I think the return and earn, I think council's actually said in the consent that return and earn needs to be deleted. And it's not granted consent as part of this application. Obviously the return.
That's council's recommendation to us, but I'd be interested in your views.
Yes, I mean, I suppose we weren't necessarily going to oppose it because it's something that we could deal with at another time. I mean, it is actually a fairly well used part of the site at present. I don't know if you would have seen anyone using it today, but it is a good initiative. And to be honest, we'd like to maintain it if possible. I mean, we just looked at, I suppose, the issue around the landscaping and thought that there was a bit of a logical fit between, okay, that's a reasonable size sort of area. It's in the order of 30, 40 square metres that we could replace with a deep soil pocket. And we could potentially revisit later where that may go. I mean, ultimately, we'd like to keep it if we could, but if the landscaping issue is as sort of strong and fundamental in the panel's view, we're not going to die in a ditch over taking that out at this point in time. Because to be honest, that what's proposed now is more important. That was installed, I suppose, as a bit of an interim solution for that part of the site, rather than sort of a long-term solution. We'd like to keep it if we could, but again, if the panel's view is the landscaping's more desirable in that location, we're not opposed to removing it.
So it's a bit like the signage. You've sort of whacked it in, and you're interested to see what happens.
That's right. So ultimately, this is what we've proposed is, I suppose, the wish list. We obviously have various priorities in terms of what's absolutely critical for us, and those things that are critical, we're pretty firm on those. But as I say, the return and earn, we're not wedded to it. We'd like to keep it if we could. We think it's not a bad little thing. And again, the signage we just proposed the size it was to respond to what Coles was really after, what Hungry Jack's was after, in terms of maximising exposure for those particular businesses.
Okay. Righto. Members of the panel, anything else that we need to ask these people or raise?
I'd like to just go on about the return and earn as well.
Yeah.
Those facility, the current facility, it's unloaded the rear of the container, so the actual face end of it is facing Brisbane Drive. For that to effectively work on this site, you'd have to face the front facing Kendall Street. There's a lot of noise involved with these things, and we're sort of putting that into a residential environment. So all the unloading of that facility, which is quite regular, I believe, but that's irrelevant. But it's quite a decent truck that comes and picks up those. That would drive into the car park and go round, loop round, then unload, and then drive all the way up through past the front of Coles. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So you're exactly right. So there'd need to be a face fronting the street. So where you deposit, and I suppose where you collect, the truck would have to come into the site, circulate around the car park, and then load and then move off. And they are obviously large waste vehicles, so there is potential noise impacts from that. So yeah, you're exactly right. There would be some operational potential issues that may arise out of that. They could potentially be mitigated to a degree, but as I say, the location that they are now kind of work from a logistic point of view, and even from a separation point of view to the neighbours. It sort of just fits together neatly in the spot that it is. So again, as I say, we're not opposed to removing it from the scheme, and it probably would have a lesser impact at that residential interface, as you pointed out.
Yeah, and the new car park, it's designed, the current one works on a one-way on the right, on the northern sector, one way, because the driveway through is a bit narrow to allow two. So the idea is to take away the landscaping to widen that, so you can have two ways. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's right. So it's just to improve circulation through there, because obviously, I mean, if you go there every day, you understand how it works. If you're just passing through, there can often be a bit of confusion as to how it works. So we've just looked to basically rationalise the line marking in the circulation area, so they actually allow for the two-way movement, which obviously means there's a bit more room as well for people as they come and go. The landscaping that does get taken out in that sort of central little bit, I think there's a couple of Morea hedges through there at the moment that'll be coming out, that we're sort of offsetting by a bit more substantial planting along the Henry Kendall Street frontage, largely a sort of screen planting to sort of complement the street trees there. So we are taking away from the central portion, putting it more on the fringe, and then, as I say, having a little bit more landscaping in that forecourt space.
Okay, thanks. No further questions.
Thank you.
Chair, I do have one question,
Sure.
if that's okay.
Yep.
The council has concerns with your garbage collection. What's the issue there that you can't come to agreement?
So my understanding, the garbage collection was more about, I suppose, the Hungry Jack's garbage collection. I'm happy for council to sort of clarify that, but my understanding is it's more the sort of receptacles for waste for the Hungry Jacks that aren't shown on the plans. That's my understanding, as opposed to any concerns around a higher level situation with the waste, because obviously we have a purposeful loading dock that we still have, and that's also going to be used for waste management. But I'm happy for the council to speak on that, but my understanding it was more in relation to the Hungry Jack's component, and the sort of.
Well, perhaps council staff can clarify that one for us. Chris,
that'd be
you there?
Yeah, sure. So it was a twofold one. It was about the Hungry Jack's waste arrangements and how that would be serviced, when it would be serviced, and where waste was located on the Hungry Jack's footing and where it was wheeled out to, etc. And then the secondary part of it was the ongoing waste. So there's some changes proposed for the tenancy and loading dock for the back of Coles that exists currently. And my understanding from our waste department was there wasn't clear ongoing waste management plans that showed how the waste would work, how individual tenancies and the childcare centre and things like that would actually access and use that waste loading bay.
Right, so it's not just Coles. Coles is a sort of a more of a where are you going to put your bins, and do we have clear access for vehicles moving around them? And then there's the use of the major Coles dock, and whether the childcare centre uses that, or what do they do? Is that the question?
Correct. So it's my understanding from looking at the plans and having spoken to the applicant in the past that there have been numerous attempts to achieve the outcome required by our waste team, but there seems to be just a couple of things that keep missing the mark.
For example, Chris, I'm looking at the plans now, and the childcare centre seems to have direct access to the internal corridor that walks directly to, with a door to, the specialised dock and bins.
Yep.
Is that right?
Can I just ask the plan you're on? I'm sorry.
Proposed main floor.
Makes sense.
I'm just looking at the purple childcare centre, and the path of travel all the way directly to the specialty dock bins.
No,
right?
It does. The last plan does appear to have, appeased a lot of the issues that were there. The latest advice I got from our waste management team was that they weren't as yet satisfied. However, I would agree with you looking at that does look fairly.
Yeah. So not satisfied about what? That's what I want to know.
This particular last plan set was the one that came through post the last referral over to our waste team. So this is one that I requested, so we had an amalgamated plan set.
Okay.
So I don't want to put James on the spot, the applicant. I would hazard a guess to say that the labelling in the bottom corner of that specialty dock and bins was probably added as part of this plan. They will satisfy waste now. I can't speak on behalf of waste, but I'm happy to ask.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm happy to talk briefly on that, just really briefly, because if you do look at the plan, we've got a separated specialty dock and bins. There's a notation. If you zoom right in, to be fair to Council and Chris, I agree. It was something that we sort of put in at the 11th hour to sort of deal with the issue, and I think it's in the sort of scheme of things that might have been missed. So all of those tenancies will utilise that rear area, which is logical to have it sort of all in a single location. So they all have access to the dock. They can all wheel the bins down there. They do have a separate area that will ultimately then be collected from the main area. So we think that's all sensible and logical in terms of the way that works, having a consolidated area off the main loading dock. And just in relation, I can talk briefly to the Hungry Jacks.
Yep.
So there's, it's hard to pick up because obviously the plans are at a fairly wide scale, but if you look at the site plan, there's sort of a hatched, almost similar hatching to what you'd see on a pedestrian crossing, I suppose, in one of the lanes of the drive-through.
Yes.
So there's a little yellow area to the left of that, which is effective on the plan. It's not very technical. I suppose that's the north side of it. That is where the sort of back of house area is. And what would occur is that hatched line marked area is effectively where the deliveries and the waste truck come, and they use that sort of side door. Obviously that blocks one of the drive-through lanes, but operationally they tend to do that at a time when the drive-through isn't as busy. So they avoid the sort of breakfast, lunch and dinner rush when those drive-through lanes are sort of being fairly well used. So in effect, one of the drive-through lanes will close, and then the waste truck will park in that area and do its thing, as well as the necessary deliveries for the Hungry Jacks as well.
But it looks like there's a drive-through lane that's still clear.
Correct. That's correct. That's exactly it.
So it doesn't block anything off.
No, correct. It blocks off one of the two lanes.
Yeah.
In off-peak, I suppose, if you want to think about it that way. Peak time, it's all systems go. Off-peak, we have one lane out of action, but we don't think we need it to at that time, and that's where it will do its thing, as is the case with most formats like this, McDonald's, KFC, all those sorts of things.
Okay, and whilst I'm on that diagram, the condition that requires dense planting adjacent to the resident at 267, that's consistent with the condition. You're happy with that one?
Yes, we are. So that requires obviously the entire thing to sort of slide, which means there'll be a little bit of take out of the landscaping that's near the entry driveway, a little bit out of that, and it will mean that we can actually get some screen planting along that existing garden bed, because it will be widened out to close to 2 metres.
And that's evergreen planting, so it's permanently there.
Correct, that's right. So we'd be looking to get some sort of hedge planting, a morea, Photinia, something that will be fairly dense, dense and solid, and is evergreen, as you say.
Okay, thank you. That's fine, Chair. I'm happy, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lynn, anything else for you? No?
Sorry, I had too many screens open. No, nothing that comes to mind specifically at this moment. Thanks, Donna.
Okay, fine. All right. Well, as I said earlier, given that we're meeting electronically, I will now formally close this this public part of the meeting and ask panel members and the Secretariat to click on their next Zoom link for the panel's deliberation. And also, as I said earlier, unlike if we were meeting face to face, we won't be coming back online this afternoon to reveal the panel's decision. What we will endeavour to do, though, is to get the draft minutes of the meeting up onto the council's website ASAP. So I'll formally close this public meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel. I'd like to thank all those who attended and took part, including my fellow panel members of the community, representatives of the applicants and council staff. Particular thanks to Mr. Douglas. We love hearing from members of the community. Thank you all very much. Panel members will be back on to the next meeting in 5 minutes for the deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.